Hello everyone, I hope you're all keeping well, healthy and happy. In this video I'm going to talk about the deistic argument for God. Now straight away when I say that word, what's going to happen is that in a whole lot of people's minds they're going to get these flashes of this image of a guy with a white beard and long flowing robes who looks down upon the earth and possesses these magical, supernatural, superstitious powers essentially. And it's interesting to me that this is the first thought that pops into people's heads. Because if you really read into the texts that many of the philosophical thinkers had within, say for example, Christianity, it's plain to see that they viewed and they held the idea of God as a metaphysical concept. And we're going to get into what it actually means through this video. But why is it that the typical imago that's drawn to mind is this image of this human variant of what is supposed to be a supernatural being? And I think the answer actually lies in the origins of what we might call inauthentic religion. Right? And you'll say to me, hang on a second, I thought you were going to talk about God. Well, of course I am, right? And I'm going to explain to you the difference between authentic religion, that is to say authentic Christianity specifically in this case, and inauthentic religion. Or we could put it in the term of inauthentic Christianity. You'll see right now, for example, particularly with Catholicism, what is happening is that the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, the Holy See, has taken quite strongly these positions which are antithetical to Western civilization. That is to say that Pope Francis, for example, is absolutely determined to side with the destroyers of civilization at present. He's extraordinarily open to the belief systems of the Islamic Empire right now. Right? And don't kid yourselves, there is still an Islamic empire which does exist, and it is expanding. But Islam is obviously at its core because of the foundational text, because they are supremacist by default, by nature. It wants to completely demolish and destroy the West. It doesn't have anything to replace it with that is actually of equal value, but it wants to completely destroy it. Meanwhile, we've got Pope Francis, who is absolutely determined to side with these people. I mean, it's ludicrous. It's insane that this is happening. He's also espousing a whole lot of socialist communist ideals. And I've explained why this is in previous videos, and that's to do with the fact that liberation theology was espoused by many people in South America who were of a religious bent. And those folks had actually been subverted by the communists in the Soviet Union. Now, this is a historical fact. You can look this up and you will see it is the case. So this current pope is absolutely and wholly invested in this ideal. Right? He is ideological. He's ideologically motivated. But this move that has happened it didn't come out of nowhere. This is what I'm trying to explain here, right? It didn't come out of nowhere. He's trying to return to the beginnings of inauthentic Christianity. And you'll say to me, what are you talking about? Well, you see, back in the day, I'll try and keep this as simple as I can because this is actually enormously complicated. Back in the day, there was authentic Christianity. That is to say, a belief system, and a set of ideals, morals, ethics, that were actually grounded and based in morality and grounded in philosophy, natural law, right? Well, what happened was that the Holy Roman Empire came along, which was different from the ancient Roman Empire, by the way. The Holy Roman Empire was a means and a ways by which the fascistic elements who wanted total totalitarian control over the masses in Rome would continue their reign. So they came up with this brilliant idea. This is what I've spoken about before, and people just haven't gotten it. It's gone over their heads a little bit, because they think that the roots of Christianity began with Rome. So when I'm criticizing Rome, or this fabrication that Rome essentially created, and by the way, this is what it all goes back to, this image of God with the white flowing beard and the robes, and looking down upon the earth in some mysterious fashion as if he's some sort of anthropomorphized man. This all leads back to the Holy Roman Empire. That image came from there. But the beginnings of the Holy Roman Empire were what led to the rise of fascism in Rome in a real sense, because the church and state were completely interlocked, and they had a total say in what was allowed to be said. They had total say on what people should do. It was imposed rule basically from a centralized government, which is what the Vatican began as. Right, the Holy See, the Holy Roman Empire, the Roman Catholic Church was, in point of fact, in its beginnings, completely totalitarian. And this is why they actually killed the authentic Christians. You might remember they used to throw Christians into the pits against the lions. Okay, this is the reason for that, because the people that could expose the inauthentic version of Christianity, which they later adopted and created and fleshed out even more, the authentic believers would know that was not true. They would challenge the authority of the Pope. They would challenge the authority of Rome. Okay? And they didn't want that, obviously. Right? The rulers never do. And by the way, that was the old world order, in case you're wondering. Today we're battling the New World Order, which has just adopted a different guise. Okay? And I'll talk about that maybe in a separate video. But I just wanted to give you that background, as it were, with regards to this. So they set up this straw man. The Roman Catholic Church set up this straw man, which was not based on anything true or philosophical originally, right? To subvert Christianity. True, authentic Christianity. Then what happened was they basically molded their own empire onto this belief system, right? And they propagated their own ideas. Why is this relevant, you might wonder, when we're talking about the deistic argument for God, and what does it have to do with liberation theology and communism? Well, as you probably know, communism had this goal to destroy Christianity. Okay, it had this goal to destroy authentic Christianity. Why was this? Well, this is because authentic Christianity, again, posed a threat to totalitarianism. This is why they keep going after it, by the way. Because after the Holy Roman Empire had succeeded in doing what it did, what happened was that natural philosophers and natural thinkers came along, like Thomas Aquinas, like St. Francis of Assisi, and I would encourage anyone to actually read their works to understand what I'm talking about in regards to this. They went forth and tried to move this totalitarian control system back to its authentic roots. So they championed free speech. They championed the importance of the Logos. They championed the teaching of that. Right? And also, as you'll know, they incorporated ideals of Greek philosophy. That is to say, the ethos, the pathos, and the logos, right? And grammar, logic, and rhetoric into the religion of Christianity, which was slightly inauthentic at the time that the Roman Catholic Church took it over. They basically moved it back to its authentic roots. And Christianity continued with those authentic roots for a long time. And obviously there were split-offs and different variations, different ideals that were created by others that were rebelling against the Roman Catholic Church. Lutheranism being one example. Martin Luther, not the Martin Luther King Jr., but the actual Martin Luther, who was a theologian, possibly could be credited as the progenitor of Protestantism, right? It's not the easiest of things to say, but the Protestant movement, he was basically responsible for that, I think, at least as far as what I can glean. But as I say, once it had been moved back to the center ground in terms of the truth being propagated, then what happened was they had to come up with a way to destroy Christianity once more. And so this is where communism came in. Communism had the ideal of destroying Christianity for this reason, because it promoted natural law, it promoted the truth, it promoted morality, it promoted a system of ethics, which obviously, again, if your system of ethics and morality, by the way, is based on natural law, which is to say that it's based on the truth, then it becomes very, very hard to destroy that, because you've got free thinkers in society that emerge as a result, right? Just by default, because of the law of action and consequences, right? But as I was saying, communism again tried to subvert and destroy Christianity, which is where liberation theology came in. And because the original Roman Catholic Church had created this straw man, this image of what God was, moving it away from its metaphysical roots, it became very easy for this atheist movement, this new atheist movement, to come along and destroy that, which is why you saw this massive shift in the West, in Western civilization, to atheism. What is atheism? This is the fundamental question. What is atheism? Well, atheism is a non-system. It is a negative, right? It is a negative in that it doesn't have any morals of its own to promote. It doesn't have any ethics to promote. It is merely the statement which is stated as a truth claim that God does not exist. And this is what Friedrich Nietzsche, by the way, was lamenting when he talked about the fact that God is dead. What that was actually saying. See, a lot of people think that was a celebration of the fact that the ideal or the understanding of God had died. No, that was actually a lamentation on the part of Nietzsche. He wasn't celebrating this fact, right? He was lamenting it. Because, again, he knew, because he was a philosopher, he understood what would happen if you take away morality and ethics from people. They descend into total chaos and madness as a direct result. If you don't propagate and teach natural law, people falter, right? People don't understand that they should not commit violence on others. People don't understand that the violence of the state's imposition, totalitarian control, is wrong. They don't understand any of these things. It all goes out the window. They don't have any sense of individuality, right? Because authentic Christianity promoted individuality. That's the interesting thing about it. But this straw man actually helped the new atheist movement to destroy the authentic aspects of Christianity and to bring down the West. This is the big problem with it. And this is why I'm talking about it so much. When I talk about the Holy Roman Empire and their creation of a non-authentic version of Christianity, I do so because it is important that people understand this, that they understand that what Christianity became, and certainly what it is now because of liberation theology, is nothing remotely like what authentic Christianity was. But we'll leave that aside for the time being, okay? I just wanted to give you that information in this video as well, so that you understand where I'm coming from when I talk about the deistic argument for God. right? What is God? Well, God is a metaphysical concept, by which we explain nature, by which we explain the natural phenomenon which we see around us. Okay, that's fundamentally what God is, the concept of God. Okay, the universal laws which are applicable to all beings, to all living things, to all dead things, to all things which are in creation. Okay? Now, let's put the straw man argument aside, because the straw man nonsense, as we've talked about with the superstition and the magical powers of God and all this business, right? That is, again, as I say, something that is non-authentic in a great many ways, right? The superstitious belief systems, the supernatural. But there are some arguments that atheists do bring to the table when they talk about, well, why perhaps God does not exist in real terms. But let me try and tackle some of those if I can. The first question people have when refuting the metaphysical existence of God is, why does suffering exist? And this to me is a very interesting question because, again, it's an anthropocentric perception on our part that death, disease, hunger, famine and pain are experiences that are inflictions upon us. And that is to say, subjectively, we feel that they're being inflicted upon us. And if they're inflicted upon us, then there must be someone doing the inflicting. Thus, we personify these phenomena as having a metaphysical being. We humans mold these personifications into manifestations and give them names. And so this is where the confusion arises from, you see. But these things, this is another very, very important point. These natural phenomena have to occur. Okay, the natural phenomenon have to occur, like death, like disease, like hunger, like famine, like pain. And you'll say to me, why? And the answer is because they are a part of living. They simply go hand in hand with existing. It is just the nature of things. It is the natural order that these things happen. They are a form of natural suffering. Natural suffering is inherent just because of the very act of being. Right? You cannot escape suffering in this life. If you exist, you're going to suffer. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they're probably trying to misguide you. If they promise you utopian visions of what could be a complete lack of suffering, that is actually antithetical to objective reality. That's why utopias can exist. That's why the idea of communism as resulting in some sort of utopia is ridiculous. It's idiotic. The same thing's true of all these other ideals that are brought to the table as well, which have the same idea of utopianism, like socialism or Islamism, which has its own version of utopia. Once everyone's converted to Islam, then you'll have a utopia. And further to that, it even goes into utopianism in the afterlife. But these parts of our existence, that is to say, death, disease, hunger, famine, pain, and many, many more, are part and parcel of being, unfortunately. And as Buddha pointed out, life is suffering. You first have to get to grips with this. You're not going to escape that. They're natural phenomena. And they exist for this following reason, by the way. Because there is a natural balance in this world. There's a natural balance. Actually, there's a natural balance in the whole universe. But in this world that we live on, there is a balance there. There's an ecosystem. Death is a way of allowing new creation, new things, to come into being. Okay? Again, this maintains the balance in the natural harmony, the natural ecosystem. Disease, again, does the same thing. Now, for us, because subjectively we feel that these things are being inflicted, to us it's very personal. To us, it is like this suffering, as I said, is being inflicted, but it's actually not. If we were able to see outside of ourselves, we would realize that pain and loss and death and all these horrible things that do happen to us subjectively, they exist for a reason. Right? They actually do exist for a reason. That there is a purpose behind them. Right? But that's the natural phenomenon. And the atheists don't understand that. And these natural phenomena, by the way, are what we anthropomorphize into deities, right? They're also the way in which we explain. These are very complex interactions, by the way, that the world has. And so God as a metaphysical concept is a way of explaining a lot of this to the younger generations that come along. It's a way of encapsulating some very, very complex ideas into one idea, which encompasses all of this, right? The second question people ask is, why is evil allowed to exist? Excuse me. The second question people ask is, why is evil allowed to exist? This question is different to the first, because in the first instance, we were looking at things that are readily identifiable as the trials and tribulations that all life forms face. That is to say, they're axiomatic, okay? But in the second instance, on the matter of evil, well, you're talking about a completely different kettle of fish, because the question you have to ask is, how do we define evil? What is evil? And then we're forced to ask, what is good? Is it merely a question of intentions? Well, clearly not, since as the old saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Intentions, therefore, whilst important, are not wholly relevant. The best explanation of evil that I can come up with, and feel free to suggest your own, is this: that it is the malevolent and purposeful visitation of physical harm by one conscious being on another. And it's also important to note that there are varying degrees of evil. Now, the knowledge and ability of how to do this evil and this harm resides in all human beings. And this is actually what makes us very, very destructive as a species at times. But, and this is the key thing that a lot of people miss, we also have the capacity for great good. That is to say, the desire and the will to limit the destruction and harm we cause. And that's a good thing, right? This is the balance of good and evil. The yin and the yang, so to speak, as manifests itself in the human being. The light and the dark. The important thing to understand, however, about evil and suffering is that they are a result of immutable natural laws which are applied in the aggregate. Let me repeat that. They are immutable natural laws applied in the aggregate. That is to say, what we human beings do en masse determines what will follow on from our actions. Okay? And if you've got an overwhelming majority of people who behave immorally, then the result of that is destruction and decay. By the way, this is the reason why some of the stories in the biblical texts talk about this. But the universe has rules. Our actions and sometimes our inactions, and this is a key point I want to put across. See, a lot of people think it's just actions and consequences. Well, also your inactions can result in consequences as well, and do result in consequences. And sometimes they're severe consequences. These laws of nature that I'm talking about, namely that the proliferation of good in the aggregate leads to good, and that unchecked evil in the aggregate leads to more evil, were anthropomorphized into the image of God and Satan. If you don't already know this, if you haven't figured this out, right? I'm sure you will have, by the way. Most people do think about these things from time to time, I'm sure. But you can see in the ancient biblical texts, the Sumerian text, the Egyptian text, and many other texts from the ancient times, that the ancient peoples used personifications of the life-giving and revivifying forces and called them God, right? And those things that caused death and destruction were viewed as satanic by nature. But it's not always the case. Again, a lot of this, there is overlap in much of this discussion because not everything is clear to us, because our viewpoint, if you will, our perceptions are in a great many ways quite subjective. But using the tools of logic, the ancients were able to discern and separate the malevolent from the benevolent. Okay? So again, what I would recommend if you want to understand this a little bit better is that you read the works of St. Francis of Assisi and Thomas Aquinas as well. Particularly if you're of a Christian persuasion, because you'll understand what authentic Christianity originally was meant to be, because these people revived that. Okay, they revived the ideals and the principles and the philosophies of those ancient philosophers, of those thinkers that were the force behind authentic, true Christianity. Okay, and the fundamental belief in God. So in true terms, because God is, as I say, a metaphysical concept and a way of explaining the enormously complex and intricate natural phenomenon which exist, those who deny God are actually denying all that is objectively true in the universe, since the concept of a monotheistic God evolved as a means of explaining enormously complicated processes. It's a very, very clever and an incredibly clever idea, I would say, right? Because, I mean, think about how much brain power it takes to come up with that, to map this idea onto the natural phenomenon, right? But of course, atheists would have you believe it's a stupid idea. The atheistic perspective, by the way, is actually quite delusional. And you'll say to me, how can you say that? A lot of people who might be atheists would say this to me, right? How can you say this? Well, the answer is very simple in this respect, because atheists are also making truth claims about unknowable metaphysical concepts, right? The realm of the metaphysical, by the way, should reside in the metaphysical. In the realm of science and materialism should reside in the realm of science and materialism, right? This is where you get the concept of non-overlapping magisteria, as it were. But the hardcore atheist, as it were, that is to say, someone who has no beliefs in anything, which I think is actually wholly and utterly impossible. And if you're somebody with no beliefs in anything, you're going to find it very difficult to discern reality from non-reality. You're actually going to live in a delusional headspace. But again, most atheists haven't really fleshed out their arguments or thought them through in real terms, because all they generally tend to do is attack straw men, which have been set up for them to attack. But the atheists' truth claims are solipsistic and nihilistic, since it denies the importance also of meaning in the life of a human being, which is in itself a metaphysical concept. You see, as far as I'm concerned, from my perspective, which is also subjective, by the way, of course, right? But from my perspective, insofar as I've looked at it, and I've tried to look at this quite deeply, there is nothing remotely logical about atheism. Okay, that is to say that nothing metaphysical exists. I mean, that is a ridiculous claim to make. Or to claim to know all that there is to know in the realm of the metaphysical is also a ridiculous claim, right? So, an atheist do both. I mean, it's quite bizarre. It's quite bizarre to say that you know definitively something about something that perhaps you have no knowledge of. And in many, many cases, right, and I'm not saying this is the case with all atheists, right? Atheists oftentimes, if they are logical and deductive and have philosophy behind them and they understand natural law, well, in those cases, by the way, I would also say you're not a true atheist. You'll find that you are closer to deistic positions. You'll find that perhaps even you're agnostic even. You could use those terminologies to describe yourself better than merely atheist. But nonetheless, let's do away with the labels for the time being. But the hardcore atheist, that is to say, the one who believes in absolutely nothing at all in their life and is devoid of meaning, is not remotely logical and is in point of fact a self-destructive force. Many times you'll find that these types of people are actually also supporters of extremely immoral positions. That is to say, they support violence being done upon people or persons, or they oftentimes jump to the defense of those who are conducting such actions. Okay, and frequently they also champion totalitarianism. That's no accident. They also oftentimes champion these ideals of communism or socialism or national socialism or whatever else it is. There's a reason behind this. This is what I'm trying to tell you. There is a reason why people believe in these malevolent totalitarian ideologies, which are actually completely immoral. That is because they have no moral compass left. And the destruction of the straw men with inauthentic Christianity in the West, in Western civilization, actually allowed this to happen. It allowed for the complete lack of morality and ethics, which people are now decrying in today's times. So it's very important that people understand natural law. It's very, very important that people understand Greek philosophy. It's very important, especially for people that are just beginning on this journey, to read the works of Aristotle on these matters, or to read the works of the Stoics, like Cicero and Seneca, or to read Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica. Okay, it's very, very important that people do this if they want to restore inner order within themselves. And that will actually help for true order, true natural order. That's what I'm talking about, not this imposed order, but true natural order to take shape in the world around us as well. Okay? Anyway, I just wanted to share my thoughts on this. I hope you found that useful or informative in some way. And I want to thank you very much for taking the time to watch this. Take good care of yourselves, have a great day, and God bless every single one of you.